I was sitting in my late husband's study, holding the life insurance check for $1.8 million, when I heard my daughter's voice drift through the open window. She was in the backyard with her husband, and what I heard next made my hands start shaking so badly I nearly dropped the check. "Mom's an emotional wreck right now," Rachel said. "She can barely function. This is the perfect time." "Are you sure she won't notice?" That was Brad, my son-in-law. "Dad just died 3 weeks ago. She's taking those sleeping pills the doctor prescribed. She's not paying attention to anything. We just need her signature on the estate documents, and then we can drain the accounts before she even realizes what happened." I sat frozen in Michael's leather chair, the same chair where he'd sat every evening for the 32 years we'd lived in this house in Tacoma. The same chair where he'd had his fatal heart attack while I was at the grocery store. My daughter was standing in our backyard, plotting to steal from me. "What about the insurance money?" Brad asked. "That's the beauty of it," Rachel said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "She already told me she wants to put it in a trust for the grandkids. All we have to do is set up the account ourselves, make her think it's legitimate, and she'll deposit the whole check. By the time she figures out something's wrong, we'll be long gone." I realized I'd stopped breathing. Long gone? My daughter was planning to disappear with my money? What if she asks questions? Brad sounded nervous. "She won't. You haven't seen her lately. She's a mess. She can barely remember to eat. Yesterday she couldn't even remember where she'd parked her car at the funeral home." Rachel laughed. Actually laughed. "We have maybe a 2-month window before she starts thinking clearly again. We need to move fast." I heard them walk away, their voices fading as they went back into the house through the kitchen door. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The check in my hand suddenly felt heavy, dangerous. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Mom, Brad and I are heading out. We'll call you tomorrow about those trust documents for the kids. Love you. Love you." 2 words that suddenly meant nothing. I want to give you some context. Rachel is my only child. My miracle baby. Born when I was 38 after years of trying. Michael and I poured everything into raising her. Private school, college tuition fully paid. When she married Brad 5 years ago, we gave them $50,000 for a down payment on their house in Olympia. When she had trouble conceiving, we paid for 3 rounds of IVF until my twin grandsons were born. I thought we were close. After Michael died, Rachel had been at the house every day, helping me sort through paperwork, making sure I ate, checking that I took my medications. She'd held me while I cried. She'd organized the funeral. She'd been the daughter I'd always believed her to be. Or so I thought. What Rachel didn't know, what Brad certainly didn't know, was that before I became a wife and mother, I'd spent 35 years as a forensic accountant. I'd worked for the IRS for a decade, then moved to private practice, helping law firms track down hidden assets in divorce cases and corporate fraud investigations. I'd retired only 3 years ago, and my skills were far from rusty. More importantly, I wasn't the emotional wreck they believed me to be. Yes, I was grieving. Yes, I was taking sleeping pills. But I was taking them at 9 p.m. and sleeping soundly until 5 a.m., when I'd wake up clear-headed and spend my mornings going through Michael's files, organizing his estate, making sure every account was documented, every asset accounted for. I'd been doing this for 23 days, and I had a complete financial picture, every bank account, every investment, every policy. I knew exactly what Michael had left me, down to the penny. And now I knew that my daughter intended to steal it all. I stood up from Michael's chair and walked to his filing cabinet. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Evidence needed for prosecution." Because that's exactly where this was heading. The next morning, I called my doctor's office and asked them to note in my file that I was alert, oriented, and not taking any medications that would impair my judgment. Then I called my attorney, Robert Chen, who'd been handling our family's legal matters for 15 years. "Eleanor, how are you holding up?" Robert's voice was warm, concerned. "I need to see you today," I said. "And I need you to bring a recording device. I have something I need to document." There must have been something in my voice because he didn't ask questions. "I can be there in an hour." When Robert arrived, I told him everything. He listened, his expression growing darker with each word. Then I played the recording I'd made. Before Rachel and Brad left yesterday, I'd gone straight to my bedroom, pulled out my iPhone, and started the voice recording app. When they came inside to say goodbye, I'd recorded our entire conversation. They'd mentioned the trust again, said they'd have documents ready for me to sign by the end of the week. "You need to record everything from this point forward," Robert said. "Every conversation, every interaction. We need to document their fraud attempt completely before we involve the police." "I know," I said. "I spent 35 years building cases. I know exactly what we need. But Eleanor, this is your daughter. Which is why the evidence needs to be absolutely airtight," I said. "Because when this goes to trial, there can't be any doubt. No room for her to claim she was joking, or that I misunderstood, or that I was confused in my grief." Robert looked at me for a long moment. "You're really going to prosecute your own daughter? She's planning to steal nearly $2 million and disappear. What would you do?" He nodded slowly. "Let me contact a colleague who specializes in elder fraud cases. We need to do this right." Over the next week, I played the role Rachel expected me to play. I acted confused when she called. I forgot details of conversations we'd supposedly had. I asked the same questions twice. I was the grieving widow, barely holding it together, easy prey for her scheme. But every time Rachel visited, I was recording. Every phone call was logged and saved. And with Robert's help, I'd contacted my banks and investment firms, alerting them that there might be fraudulent activity attempted on my accounts. They flagged everything for additional verification. Rachel came over on Wednesday evening with a stack of papers. "Mom, I've set up that trust for the boys," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "The lawyer said this is the best way to protect the insurance money for their college funds." I looked at the papers. They looked official, with a law firm's letterhead at the top. Except the law firm didn't exist. I'd already checked. The address was a UPS store in Tacoma. The phone number went to a disconnected line. "This seems so complicated," I said, playing my part. My phone was in my cardigan pocket, recording every word. "Are you sure this is necessary?" "Absolutely," Rachel said, putting her arm around my shoulders. "Dad would want you to do this. He'd want to make sure his grandsons were taken care of." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. How long had she been planning this? Had she been waiting for Michael to die? "Where do I sign?" I asked. She showed me. 3 different places, next to yellow sticky tabs she'd helpfully placed. I picked up the pen, and for just a moment, I hesitated. This was still my daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd taught to drive, the bride whose hand I'd held when she was nervous before walking down the aisle. Then I remembered her laugh in the backyard. She can barely remember where she'd parked her car. I signed. But I signed Mickey Mouse in my best handwriting. Rachel didn't even look at the signatures. She just gathered up the papers, smiling. "Perfect, Mom. Now, the lawyer said you should wire the insurance money to this account as soon as possible, for tax purposes." She handed me a deposit slip with account and routing numbers. "I'll do it tomorrow," I said. "Actually, Mom, it really needs to be today. Before the end of business, I can drive you to the bank right now if you want." "I'm so tired," I said. "Can't it wait?" "The tax penalty if we miss the deadline is 20%, Rachel said. She was such a good liar. "That's $360,000, Mom. I know you don't want to lose that much money." "Okay," I said. "Let me get my purse." We drove to my bank, the same credit union I'd used for 40 years. Rachel walked me inside, her hand on my elbow like I was an invalid. We approached the counter, and I asked to make a wire transfer. "I'll need to verify the account," the teller said, exactly as I'd arranged with the bank manager earlier that week. "It's right here," Rachel said, handing over the deposit slip. The teller took it, typed something into her computer, and then said, "I'm sorry, but this account doesn't exist in our system. I'll need to get my manager." Rachel's face went pale. "That's not possible. The lawyer just set it up." The bank manager came over, a woman named Patricia whom I'd known for 15 years. "Mrs. Morrison, is there a problem?" "My daughter has an account number for a trust fund," I said. "But apparently it's not working." Patricia looked at the slip, then looked at Rachel. "May I ask which law firm set this up?" Rachel gave the name from the fake letterhead. "I'm not familiar with that firm," Patricia said. "Let me make a call." We waited. Rachel was texting furiously on her phone. I pretended not to notice. Patricia came back. I'm sorry, but that law firm doesn't exist. I think there might be some confusion here. There must be a mistake, Rachel said, but her voice was shaking now. Mom, let's go home and call the lawyer. We can figure this out. Actually, I said, and my voice was no longer confused or weak. I think I'd like to speak to the police. Rachel's face went white. What? Mom, no. There's just been a miscommunication. Officer Stevens is already here, Patricia said, nodding toward the bank's entrance. A police officer I'd met with earlier that week walked in. Robert Chen was right behind him. Mrs. Morrison? Officer Stevens said. You called about an attempted fraud? Rachel started backing toward the door. This is insane. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The grief. I'm thinking very clearly, I said. I pulled out my phone. Robert, do we have enough? More than enough, my attorney said. Officer, Mrs. Morrison has been recording multiple conversations in which her daughter and son-in-law discuss plans to steal her assets through fraudulent documents and accounts. She has voice recordings, forged documents, and what just occurred here is an attempted execution of that fraud. You recorded me? Rachel's voice was shrill. Your own daughter? You were planning to rob me, I said. Your own mother, while I was grieving your father. The officer looked at Rachel. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions. I want a lawyer, Rachel said immediately. That's your right, Officer Stevens said. He put handcuffs on her wrists, and I felt something break inside my chest, even though I'd been preparing for this moment all week. As they led her out of the bank, Rachel looked back at me. For a moment, I thought I saw remorse in her eyes, but then she said, You'll never see your grandsons again. I hope you know that. That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. The investigation moved quickly. With my recordings and documentation, the prosecutor had everything he needed. They searched Rachel and Brad's house and found draft documents on Brad's laptop, notes about timing the fraud, research about my sleeping pill prescription, and how long it would keep me manageable. They'd been planning this for months, long before Michael died. In fact, they'd been planning it since he was diagnosed with heart disease 2 years ago. The prosecutor found their debt. Rachel and Brad owed $230,000 to various credit cards and a loan shark connected to Brad's gambling problem. They'd been living far beyond their means, hiding it from everyone. They needed my money to disappear and start over somewhere else. The preliminary hearing was held on a cold October morning, 3 months after Michael's death. I sat in the courtroom with Robert beside me. Rachel and Brad sat at the defense table, not looking at me. The prosecutor played my recordings. All of them. Rachel's voice, so clear and cold, saying, She can barely function. This is the perfect time. I watched the jury's faces as they listened. I watched them recoil when they heard her laugh. The trial lasted 6 days. The defense attorney tried to argue that Rachel had been joking, that she never intended to go through with it, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the fake documents, the fake law firm, the attempted wire transfer at the bank, none of that was ambiguous. Rachel took the stand on the 5th day. She cried. She talked about how stressed she'd been, how scared about the debt, how Brad had pressured her. She said she loved me, that she never would have really done it, that she'd planned to stop before it went too far. But she couldn't explain the laptop files. She couldn't explain the research about my medication. She couldn't explain standing in my bank and trying to get me to wire $1.8 million to a fraudulent account. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, forgery, and elder abuse. Rachel got 5 years. Brad got 7 because of his prior record. They both faced restitution orders for the legal costs and the value of Michael's estate, though I knew I'd never see that money. They'd spent everything they had on lawyers. I sat in the courtroom when the sentences were read, and I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying in private, in Michael's study, sitting in his chair and wondering how we'd raised a daughter who could do this. The day after the sentencing, I received a letter from Rachel's attorney. She was giving up her parental rights to the twins. Child Protective Services had placed them with Brad's sister in California during the trial. Rachel's letter said she couldn't bear for them to visit her in prison, to see her like that. She said it was better if they thought of her as dead. I contacted Brad's sister, Melissa. We'd met a few times at family gatherings. She was kind, stable, married to a teacher. The boys were adjusting well, she said. They were asking about their grandma, though. Can I visit? I asked. Of course, Melissa said. Eleanor, none of this is your fault. But it felt like my fault. It felt like I'd failed somewhere, somehow, in raising Rachel. I flew to Sacramento the following month. The boys were 5 years old, identical twins with Rachel's dark hair and Brad's blue eyes. They remembered me. They ran into my arms, and I held them, breathing in their little boy smell of grass and sunshine and juice boxes. Where's Mommy? One of them asked. Mommy's sick, Melissa said gently. She's going to be away for a while. Is Grandma staying? The other one asked. Just for the weekend, I said. But I'll visit lots. And I have. Once a month, I fly to California and spend 3 days with my grandsons. I take them to the zoo, to the park, to movies. I read them stories at bedtime. I'm teaching them to play chess, the way Michael taught Rachel. Melissa and I have talked about me moving to California permanently. Her husband thinks it's a good idea. The boys need stability, she says, and more family around them. I'm considering it. There's nothing keeping me in Tacoma now except ghosts and memories. I sold the house. I couldn't stay there after everything that happened. Too many ghosts, like I said. Michael's ghost in his study. Rachel's ghost in the backyard, laughing while she plotted to rob me. I bought a smaller condo near the water and used some of the insurance money to set up actual trust funds for the twins, managed by a legitimate law firm with strict oversight. The boys will have money for college, for their futures, no matter what happens. People ask me sometimes if I regret prosecuting Rachel, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The truth is, I don't know. I replay that week over and over. Could I have confronted her privately? Could I have offered to pay off her debts? Could I have saved my relationship with my daughter while also protecting myself? But then I remember the research on her laptop, the detailed timeline, the contingency plans. This wasn't a desperate mistake made in a moment of panic. This was calculated, premeditated, planned down to the day and hour when I'd be most vulnerable. They were waiting for me to be weak enough to exploit. And the thing that haunts me most, Rachel's last words in the bank, not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," but "you'll never see your grandsons again." Even when caught, even when exposed, she tried to hurt me one more time. That's when I knew the daughter I'd raised, the daughter I'd loved, was already gone. Maybe she'd been gone for years, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. Last month, I got a letter from Rachel, her first letter in almost a year. She's in a minimum security facility in Gig Harbor, and she says she's getting counseling. She says she's working through her issues with gambling and debt, and what she calls her complicated relationship with money. She says she thinks about me every day. She says she hopes someday I can forgive her. She didn't say she was sorry. I haven't written back yet. I'm not sure what I would say. I'm not sure forgiveness is something I'm capable of giving right now. Maybe that makes me a bad mother. Maybe a good mother would find a way to rebuild the relationship, to see past the betrayal, to focus on redemption. But I'm not just a mother. I'm also a person who was targeted, manipulated, and almost destroyed by someone who was supposed to love me. And I'm a person who refused to be a victim. I kept the yellow legal pad from that first day, the one where I wrote evidence needed for prosecution. It sits in my desk drawer in my new condo. Sometimes I take it out and look at my handwriting from that afternoon, still shaky from the shock of what I'd heard. Below that first line, I'd written something else, something I don't remember writing but must have: trust but verify. It's what Michael used to say when he reviewed contracts for his business. Trust but verify. I'd trusted Rachel completely, and that trust nearly cost me everything. The twins are asking if they can come visit me in the summer. They want to see the ocean, to play on the beach, to go on the ferry to the islands. I said yes. I'm already planning the trip, researching tide pools and whale-watching tours. Their mother will be in prison for 4 more years. By the time she's released, they'll be 10 years old. Will they even remember her? Will Melissa tell them the truth about why their mother went away? Those are questions for another day. For now, I'm focused on the boys, on being the grandmother they need. I'm focused on building a new life in a new place, one without the shadows of betrayal hanging over every room. And sometimes, late at night, I sit on my balcony overlooking the water and think about that afternoon in Michael's study. I think about how close I came to signing those real documents, to wiring that money, to losing everything. I think about how different my life would be right now if I hadn't walked past that open window at exactly the wrong or exactly the right moment. Mostly, I think about the fact that I'm still here, still standing, still fighting, still whole, even if I'm different now. Harder, maybe, more careful, less trusting, but also more aware of what I'm capable of. I took on my own daughter in court and won because I had evidence, because I had skills, because I refused to be anyone's victim. The life insurance check is long since deposited, the money allocated and protected. Michael's estate is settled, the house is sold. One chapter of my life is closed, and another is beginning, this time in California, near my grandsons, starting over at 65. It's not the retirement Michael and I planned. It's not the family I thought I had. But it's mine, and I built it from the wreckage of what I lost. And that, I'm learning, is enough.